Everyone says I love you, but just what they say it for I never knew. It's just inviting trouble for the poor sucker who says I love you.
I love good music.
So do I. Let's get out of here.
Sit down.
Florida, folks, sunshine, sunshine, perpetual sunshine all the year around. Let's get the auction started before we get a tornado.
Hello, YouTube and YouTubettes. Welcome to a Marx Brothers review. I am Robbo.
And I'm Becko.
And today we will review the Marx Brothers movie Cocoanuts. In an effort to keep his business, Hotel de Cocoanuts, from bankruptcy, owner Hammer flatters and cajoles the wealthy Mrs. Potter, his only paying guest. While Mrs. Potter's daughter, Polly, has romantic designs on the hotel clerk, Bob, two other guests conspire to steal jewels from Mrs. Potter. Meanwhile, brothers Harpo and Chico take advantage of Hammer's inattention to wreak havoc around the hotel. So, Becko, what was your overall thoughts of the story of this movie?
I feel like it was a little bit slow. It kind of lacked some interest at times. The way that the scenes progressed just weren't as exciting as I remember it when I was a kid. I feel like some of the characters were a bit lackluster, that there wasn't really enough to them to make them even caricatures or any sort of person that was memorable, except for possibly one or two of them, but some of the side characters were just kind of extremely bland.
All right. For me, I think that the story was too cliche in a sense. There wasn't enough intensity. I mean, there was a couple of moments, but I feel like it was kind of a lame story in that sense, or it wasn't built up enough to make you care enough about the stolen jewelry or other things that were going on. It didn't really pull me into the characters that were in love enough to really care. I felt like it was more cute than good, if that makes sense. So, Becko, was there any scenes that really stuck out to you?
I kind of had two favorite scenes that sort of mirrored each other. One of them kind of took some things and sort of completed the jokes, or was very similar to an earlier scene. One of them was the scene with the auction, and then later on it's the scene at the engagement dinner. And there's some really similar qualities to both scenes. Both of them include a speech from Groucho and some of the reactions from the people in the room or at that auction. The dinner scene at the end was really a pretty good way to end the movie, and one of the more interesting and entertaining parts of the movie, as well as the earlier scene that kind of mirrors it, the auction scene. A lot of comedy in both of these scenes. It really helps further the plot as well, and just quite a bit more entertaining than most of the rest of the movie.
Yes, I agree. I think those two were the most entertaining and intense scenes. Most of the movie wasn't intense, but those two scenes brought some intensity to it. I would have to lean a little bit more towards the dinner scene, because I think that it, like you said, it wrapped things up very well. So from 1 to 10, what would you rate this story?
I give the story a 2.
And I'll give it a 6. All right, now we're going to talk about the overall visual production quality of the movie. And Becko is a costumer for local theater, so what were your thoughts on the costumes in the movie?
In general, the costumes were pretty average. There wasn't anything special about them. I did notice a few things that some touches that added to the different characters. There's one scene where Groucho and Zeppo are standing at a desk together, and even though they're brothers and in real life they're not too many years apart, the way they were dressed had them look like they were from different generations. They have Groucho always dressed up kind of like he's middle-aged and from a different era. And Zeppo looked very kind of the highest fashion suits of the time. The costumes in the engagement party scene were pretty interesting. It was literally a costume party with a Spanish traditional theme. So that some of the costumes were pretty comical, but some of them were quite interesting and beautiful and a little more over the top. And I wish that I could have seen more over the top and interesting costumes throughout the movie.
Interesting. So I'll let you do all the costume talk because I don't think, in terms of the clothing, I'm not good with style. A couple of things we noticed when we were watching it was sometimes the camera work was a little off and that there wasn't centered or didn't get everybody in it or whatever. And this was fairly early in movie making, so that may have something to do with it. But this was also originally written as a stage play. So I assume a lot of the scenes and a lot of the like dance numbers and things were meant to be stage scenes. In some cases I mentioned that it looks like a scene that is meant for the main characters to change costumes or whatever, that it really had a music number that really added nothing and it wasn't that great. It just kind of gave time for characters to change costumes, and they probably just kept that in there. So, do you have any other thoughts on the quality or production of the movie?
Well, at times it was difficult to hear the dialogue, some of the sound quality, and even some of the visual. At times it wasn't that great, but that may just be because it's an older film and the technology was still pretty new.
Interesting. Yes, that's true. It's hard to know that comparing it to other 1929 movies, and I don't know if you've seen a lot of 1929 movies.
I've seen a few.
But it's hard to know how it really stacks up overall at the time.
It was pretty early on in sound, so a lot of their sound was just recorded live on set, and they didn't make a whole lot of cuts to the film, so everything seems to be almost done in one take, and there's not a lot of fine-tuning, so it feels more like you're watching a recorded stage play than a film, which later on they were able to like do multiple cuts to really perfect each and every scene. But I suppose that wasn't as much of as important to them at that time.
Now, I know in the Marx Brothers movies, they often had to make cuts because people would crack up. And I don't know how much they ad-libbed in the movie because they had already done it on stage many times. But I know the Marx Brothers were kind of troublemakers at the time, so I'm sure that it happened during Cocoanuts. Yes. In fact, didn't you say that you saw a couple times where one of the actors was cracking up?
Yes, I almost feel like in the same way that if you were doing a dress rehearsal, you wouldn't ever stop unless it was kind of a train wreck and you couldn't really get back on track. And I feel like they kind of do the same thing where they wouldn't stop to make cuts unless they had completely gone off the rails to where it was like a noticeable thing for everyone and they had to fix it. I think also that at that time to edit film and to make those cuts, they had to do that by hand, and it was probably very costly and was a very delicate work. So they would rather save that for the times that they absolutely had to do it. So you still see some of their mistakes, some of their flubs, and the secondary actors trying to keep straight faces. But to me, that kind of makes it almost like watching a stage play.
Yeah. So how would you grade the overall quality of this movie?
I would also give that a 2.
And I gave it a 4. All right, the music in the movie. So what are your thoughts on the songs or the music or the overall music part of it?
The music in this movie was written by Irving Berlin, who is one of the most well-known Broadway musical writers. He's probably most known for writing White Christmas, which isn't really my favorite and I'm not that familiar with. But I know his name, and he's definitely written many, many hit songs. I would imagine that this is probably one of the first musicals that he wrote. There was sort of a repetitive song that was kind of the theme song for the movie. It was extremely simple, so much so that you kind of got tired of it after hearing it once. There wasn't anything special about it, but it was sort of the love song between the young couple.
Wasn't it called When Your Dreams
When Your
Come
Dreams
True?
Come True,
Yeah.
yes. So it was repeated multiple times. Sometimes it was played just instrumental, sometimes there was a dance, and sometimes it was sung. But the theme song wasn't that great of a song. It was just extremely boring and plain. There were some musical numbers that did stand out to me. The Marx Brothers, being very gifted in different kind of instruments, are always pretty entertaining when they play. I did feel like there was a couple too many solos on instruments that didn't really further the plot or help the story any. It is part of the Marx Brothers style and what they put in all their movies, where both Chico and Harpo do a musical number on their own, which is more serious or just kind of less about the play and just something they stick in there, which is totally good, and it's just a flavor that only they can add. But Harpo had two solos, which put it overboard to where it was unnecessary. As far as the songs themselves, my favorite song was a song that actually Irving Berlin did not write, and it was based on an opera, a pretty well-known opera, and I wish I knew which opera. But that song was I Want My Shirt. And so it came out of nowhere. It didn't necessarily further the plot, but it was just the right kind of comedy that you needed in the movie. Probably one of the best scenes, and it was extremely random and made it hilarious. But it was just their words. I don't know who wrote the words, but funny words written to an operatic song. Many of the other songs weren't very memorable. The leading lady, or the young woman, Polly, the actress that played her, she had a dance number where she sang and danced. And she was actually incredibly good at singing, dancing, and acting, all three, which we don't have too many of those that are just exceptionally good at all of them. And the monkey dance number was pretty good. The dancing was very interesting and well done. And that song also stood out. Some of the chord progressions were pretty interesting.
Yeah, so I am a musically sensitive person, so I like music generally speaking, but I'm also picky. I think that the theme song, though very, very simple, is nice. And, like the movie itself and like the love romance between the two lead characters, to me was not very capturing as much as it was cute. So the theme song, When Your Dreams Come True, was just cute to me. And so now that you mentioned the two times that Harpo played, I thought it was cool that he played the oboe, but in both cases, both with the oboe and the harp, he played the same song. So it would have been nice if in either the harp or the oboe he played something completely different.
And I mentioned this to you too, is that when he played the oboe, it would have been nice to see him do it as a shorter song, or maybe something that was more comical, rather than another long, serious number, just like the one he ends up playing 1 or 2 minutes later.
Right. But it was nice to see him play the oboe. And you could tell it was him because he made it squeak for a second. And I also love the Monkey in the Zoo song, kind of a very jazzy kind of thing. And I also say that my favorite song was I Want My Shirt. Very funny, and they performed it very well. So, what would you say your grade is for the overall music, 1 to 10?
My grade for the music is 2.
I can see you're a little pickier than I am, but that's okay.
Yeah.
I give it a 5. I thought there's music out there that really annoys me, and I didn't think this music really annoyed me that much. I thought it was okay to listen to, but I have to be honest that main song started to get on my nerves a bit. But I gave it a 5. All right, so now we'll talk about the performances in the movie. So, first of all, were there any non-Marx Brother actors that stuck out to you? Generally speaking, what did you think of the performance of the actors that were not Marx Brothers?
Most of them were okay. None of them really stood out to me. I kind of wish the villains were a little bit more villainy. They just kind of were a bit dry. The policeman was pretty funny, just his subtle reactions to things. There was also a bellboy at the beginning. He was in one scene and he just is part of one quick conversation. And I was like thinking he was a good actor, but then they never show him again. Polly and Bob, which is the young couple, were just kind of okay. But as I mentioned before, the performances were not really that great. I wish they had gone a little more over the top with them. But my favorite non-Marx Brothers character is Margaret Dumont's Mrs. Potter. What Margaret Dumont adds to a Marx Brothers movie is pretty genius. And I don't know why they kept going back to her, because she's not like a likely person to have that type of chemistry with Groucho Marx. And they just kept bringing her back, and she added a lot to it. And I don't know if this was their first time to work together or if they have worked on stage in anything.
Yeah, they did work on stage.
Yeah, but there's just something about their chemistry that's pretty unique. But I would say that she's definitely my favorite in this one.
Yeah, Groucho in an interview said that Margaret Dumont was like a fifth Marx Brother and the perfect straight man to him. And I think she has better performances in other movies, and that's definitely hard to argue against Margaret Dumont. I do think that the girl that played Polly was pretty good, actually, and had a little bit of diversity. Perhaps it was hard because she was kind of pulled down by the chemistry with the other actors, but I thought she did a pretty good job. All right, so now let's talk about the Marx Brothers themselves. Now, who was your favorite Marx Brother performance in this movie?
In some ways, it's difficult to choose. I really liked all of their performances. Zeppo had a very small part in it, but he always seems to be consistent in whatever he's doing. He's not ever the funny guy, but he's very consistent in his acting. My favorite, though, in this one is definitely Harpo. The way he interacted with the scenes was pretty great. His facial expressions are always spot on. Definitely made me laugh more than Groucho or Chico. But just the character he created is pretty special, I think, and unique. And a lot of the Marx Brothers movies seems to be set in a very like affluent place where you have hoity-toity people. And then when you throw Harpo in the mix, I think it's perfect. And the way he interacts with literally everybody, you could see that some of the minor parts, the bellboys and the different people in the scenes were trying to keep from laughing when Harpo was interacting with them. And he didn't have to say a word and was the funniest.
Yeah. In fact, he was the only one that had been in a movie before. He was in a silent film. And I agree. I think Harpo was the best. And not just in terms of comedy. He was definitely, Groucho. And it's usually in most movies it's going to be between Groucho and Harpo, but we'll see. But I also wanted to give Harpo props on a couple of very charming scenes when he gives the lollipop or offers the lollipop to the girl that was crying, to Polly when she was crying. And that was actually perhaps the most touching moment in the movie. And I don't know if it was really meant to be that touching, but
it was pretty cute. I think that in modern day terms it would have been considered creepy, but in the setting that it was in, it was pretty cute scene.
So that was probably the touchingest part. So yeah, definitely Harpo. So how would you grade the performances overall in the movie?
I would give the performances a 3.
And I would give it a 5. And now we get to the main purpose of the Marx Brothers, and that is the humor. So what were some of your favorite funny scenes in the movie.
Well, this scene does have some iconic Marx Brothers humorous scenes, just some lines that, we kind of all know the Marx Brothers for. The Wyaduck scene, the as well as the auction scene and the bidding was pretty funny. Whenever Groucho kind of gives a speech and he starts rattling off, half of what he says doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. And I think that's pretty funny. I mean, if you really break down some of what he says, you kind of understand the jokes within it. But a lot of it is like you couldn't really trail where he was going with it. Some of the jokes that Chico makes, you can kind of tell that they are not a very sophisticated set of people. They're not going to have very highly intellectual type of humor, and their grammar and how they base jokes on the English language is not always spot on, but that doesn't mean they're not doing it right. It just means it doesn't always make sense, but their delivery is what makes it funny. There were a few like really iconic scenes, but I think the one that is especially iconic, and it's actually between Groucho and Margaret Dumont, is sort of their scene on the couch where they're kind of flirting with each other. It's the whole part where he says he sees her bending over a hot stove, but he can't see the stove.
Actually, that was in another one, but yeah.
That wasn't in that scene?
No. But it is between the two of them, but in Duck Soup. But we'll get to that.
Okay, but there's a lot of stuff they do in that scene that's pretty classic for them.
I think he did the insult of the blue serge suit. Your eyes look like the pants of a blue serge suit.
See, that's something I don't remember, but I do remember him saying, "You and the moon, you'll wear a necktie so I can see, so I can tell who you are."
Yeah.
It's funny how
he's insulting, yet he's also trying to flirt with her
and flirts with her. And the fact that Margaret Dumont is so naive to it that she just, you could tell she's offended, but she keeps on going.
Right.
And there's just something about it that there's no other a couple of people that will have that same type of joke.
Yeah.
I mean, the joke is ongoing throughout the movies, but I can't really picture anyone else that has that kind of dynamic between them.
And we'll see that her character is a little diverse depending on the movie. Some movies she's charmed by Groucho, and other movies she's annoyed. I think in this one she was more annoyed by Groucho than anything. But yeah, that was definitely funny. I feel like when Groucho talks, and he tends to say a lot fast, there's a lot of funny things in there that can easily be missed. Some of it is, I consider it to be nonsensical humor.
And some of it takes a second. The whole line where he says, "Aunt Fanny had an 8-pound boy. Can you please come to the wedding?" It doesn't really.
Yeah.
You don't have to stop and laugh at it because he's just going to keep going.
Right.
And he's going to rattle on about more stuff that you're even like, why is he saying this? I don't even remember why he's telling the bellboys this. Why is he telling this whole speech to the bellboys? Was he reading a telegram or something? Like you couldn't even really picture why he's talking and why these bellboys are listening.
Well, that
to
line that he had at that scene, which was, "I came into this town without a nickel in my pocket. Now I've got a nickel in my pocket."
Yeah, it's just the way he says it sounds kind of funny.
Yeah.
And he always seems to have an audience, even though what he's saying doesn't require an audience.
Well, I think the funniest scene was between the two rooms and the chase, like the runaround.
Oh, it's a very slapstick, very old movie.
But little things, there was a lot of little things in that was really funny, like Groucho hiding in the closet, and the cop says, "Well, there's nobody in here," and Groucho goes, "You don't know where to look." And it's
it defeats the purpose of him hiding.
And they don't even notice that he's there, or he doesn't even notice that Groucho's there. It's
the dumbest police officer in the world. But where people are always right behind his back, and every time he turns.
But I have a sense that originally that was ad-lib, so the cop wasn't supposed to know that he was there. But then you see Harpo swimming. she goes, "It's going along swimmingly now," and Harpo is like spitting out water. But they're all kind of flirting with the villainess. I forget
Yeah,
her
and you're
name.
kind of like, why? What is?
Because I think
I know
the
it's
reason they're flirting is because they
Mhm.
all scheduled a date with her. Remember when she was
Yeah.
like, "Has anyone told you look like the Prince of Wales?" The only one she didn't schedule a date with was Groucho. So it was only
Yeah.
Chico and
But some of the
Harpo.
interactions didn't make sense. It was just
Mhm.
slapstick humor, but it didn't necessarily fit like what those characters would have done.
Right.
They just did them, and
But it
they
was
didn't.
just chaotic and
didn't
random,
matter.
which they were
Yeah.
really good at doing, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So how would you grade the overall humor in the movie?
I give the humor a 4.
And I gave it a 7. Okay, so our final thoughts on the movie. Becko?
Just a quick thing that I didn't remember to put in earlier, but the opera that the "I Want My Shirt" song, the music was from Carmen, and it's the Toreador song from that. So
Addicted to Jesus.
not that
Oh.
Carmen, the opera Carmen.
Oh.
So that's kind of a fun fact there.
Mhm.
I kind of scored this one low because I was hoping that in the grand scheme of things compared to the other Marx Brothers movies, that this would be on the lower end of what they're capable of and what I personally would enjoy seeing.
It might be actually better than some of the last few that they did, but
It might be, and the thing is there are some scenes in Cocoanuts that are incredibly good, but the puzzle pieces don't really fit together.
yeah.
So you have one really good puzzle piece, but the puzzle is crap.
There's definitely much better to come.
So I appreciate it for what it is, but my scoring is, I'm probably being extra. I'm grading it maybe slightly lower than I normally would have, just because I'm hoping that averaging it against other Marx Brothers movies, that there will be some improvement.
So you don't think it's quite to Gone with the Wind level?
No. Not
So
at all.
what would
And I think I prefer a movie that is more like well edited and thought through scripts.
Yeah.
It's not that I never appreciate an ad-libbed movie or something that feels more live rather than something that's very like extra polished. It doesn't mean I don't appreciate that. It just means it has to be done well, or it's not.
Yeah,
It doesn't work.
I think I'm a little bit more forgiving of it, considering it was 1929 and it was their first movie. And I think it's definitely not their best. It's far from their best, but I think to me it's their beginning of film, the first Marx Brothers film. So I give them a little bit of a break for that. And if I'm in the mood, it's somewhat enjoyable for me to watch. So what was your final score?
My final score for the movie is 2.8.
And mine was a 5.67. So, all right, that was our review for Cocoanuts.
Now is the time to buy while the new boom is on. Remember that old saying? A new boom sweeps clean. And don't forget the guarantee. My personal guarantee. If these lots don't double in value in a year, I don't know what you can do about it.